Welcome to a world of sewing where hours of repetitious labor are whisked away at a touch of a control. Where threading is always simple and there are new and more stitches to choose from. A world where you can sew ambitious projects with confidence. You can sew a seam or make a dress, reinforce a sleeve, create a border, or embroider a sampler, monogram initials, or create your own personal signature. The possibilities are endless. Welcome to the world of the Kenmore 150-stitch sewing machine. Congratulations! You've made a wise choice in selecting your Kenmore 150-stitch. It will bring you year after year of dependable service. You know you can trust the Kenmore name, and with the help of this video, your printed instruction manual, and a little practice, you'll be taking on even advanced sewing projects without worry. This video is divided into 4 sections. The introduction, which you are watching, the basics that will get you started, how to do common stitches, and then how to do more advanced stitches. As you can see, each section is color coordinated, has a title page and a number. With these cues, you should find each section quickly. And because VCR counters will vary, you may even want to zero the counter on your VCR and make a note as to when each section appears on the tape. This way, you can refer quickly to a particular section. Now, take a minute to acquaint yourself with the Kenmore 150-stitch. One of the benefits of the unit is there are so few pieces. They're in the machine itself, your foot control, power cord, and your accessory storage box. You can store your accessories simply by keeping them in the machine. It keeps things together nicely. Here are some of the key parts of the machine that we'll be referring to: the liquid crystal display, keyboard, thread tension dial, thread cutter, hand wheel, light and power switch, plug connector, the presser foot lever, and the free arm. In your accessory storage box, you find these items: the presser foot storage compartment with feet, bobbins, the lint brush, large and small screwdrivers, the buttonhole opener, extra spool pin and felt, small spool holder, needle set, and the twin needle. Remember, you can also get specific information quickly from the enclosed printed manual. And beyond that, advice on the operation and care of your machine is always available at your nearest Sears retail store. Now, let's get started on the basics. You begin the sewing process by turning on the machine and threading it. The first step in threading is to wind the bobbin. You wind the bobbin because to make a stitch, the machine needs 2 sources of thread. One from the actual thread spool, and another from this bobbin. To wind the bobbin, lift up the spool pin, then put the spool of thread onto the spool pin with the thread winding this way, and put the spool holder on top of the spool. Take off the bobbin cover plate by sliding the hook cover plate release button to the right and take out the bobbin like this. Pull the thread around the bobbin thread guide like this. Now place the end of the thread through the bobbin so that it comes out to the top like this. Once you have done that, put it on your bobbin winding spindle. Push the bobbin winding spindle to the right until it clicks. Now hold on to the end of the thread and press down on the foot control. Wind on just enough thread so that the first wrap is secured. Clip the thread end and slowly start the machine again. Wind the thread until the bobbin stops. You notice the message, "Bobbin winding" on the liquid crystal display. During the bobbin winding, all other keys and buttons will be turned off. It slows down and stops automatically, even though you have your foot on the control. Now push this spindle to the left, clip the thread, and remove the bobbin. 10 foot A will appear in the liquid crystal display. The selected pattern appears clearly on the liquid crystal display with its symbol and/or number, and it also tells you which foot is to be used at the same time. By pressing the message pad, the necessary information will appear on the liquid crystal display. Now, put the bobbin back in the bobbin holder and make sure you feed the thread counterclockwise. Then pull out about 4 inches of thread towards you through this tension slot. Then pull the thread clockwise toward the back of the machine through this second slot. Finally, put the bobbin cover plate back on, leaving about 4 inches sticking out, like this. Over here, there are arrows to guide you along the threading path. Preparing your top thread is the last step before you're off and sewing. Raise the take-up lever to the highest position by turning the hand wheel towards yourself. Raise the presser foot lever. Put the thread on the spool pin. Now watch the threading pad. Slip it through this thread guide and follow the arrows, down, around, and up, then through the top of the take-up lever, down and through the 2 thread guides. Thread the needle from front to back. You may want to cut the end of the thread with sharp scissors or wet the thread to make it go through the needle eye easier. Then hold the end of the thread from the top spool with your left hand. Press this up-down needle position button twice. 1 down, 2 up. Now bring a loop of the bobbin thread up, that's the bottom thread, by pulling the top thread like this. Pull both threads under and to the back of the presser foot, leaving clear 4 to 6 inches of the thread. And now you're ready to sew. In the next section, we learn some common stitches that will help you do most of your basic sewing projects. Sewing used to be a mountain of chores, but no longer with the Kenmore Computer 150 stitch. Now it's easy to do most common tasks simply by knowing a few stitches. In the same way we worked through threading your machine, now we'll learn 3 primary stitches: the straight stitch, the zigzag stitch, and a mending stitch. The most common and versatile of your stitches is the straight stitch. You can use the straight stitch for a regular seam as well as pin tucking, quilting, zippers, top stitching, darning, mending, basting, and gathering. The Kenmore 150 stitch makes the straight stitch very easy. When you turn on the machine, it automatically sets to sew a straight stitch, pattern 10. After you thread the machine, begin your straight stitch by raising the presser foot like this. Put the fabric under the presser foot with the edge of the fabric next to a stitching guideline. See them on the needle plate? Lower the presser foot and press the foot control. Hold the fabric loosely and gently guide it along the line so that it feeds naturally. At the end of the seam, you may want to reverse by touching this reverse stitch button for 3 or 4 stitches to lock in the seam. When you're done, cut the thread with your convenient cutter. The zigzag stitch is one of the most common and most versatile stitches on your machine. It can be a utility stitch for sewing buttons, buttonholes, hemming, overcasting, mending, and darning. It can also be used to decorate with trims, appliques, and cutout work, or as a decorative stitch. There is more than one type of zigzag stitch. Consult the charts in your printed owner's manual for the zigzag stitch that best suits your sewing project. Our demonstration will be for the basic zigzag stitch. The zigzag is so common that your Kenmore 150 stitch has a special direct entry pad for it, so you don't have to enter the number. The basic zigzag stitch is number 13. You notice a foot A on the display. This tells you the presser foot to use. There are different types of presser feet for different types of stitches. For your zigzag stitch, be sure to use a zigzag foot. For our demonstration, we will use the A foot. Now, pull back the threads and line up the fabric on the guide. Check the thread tension. It should be set around 5. Then lower the presser foot, press the foot control, and away you go. When you have completed your zigzag section, touch your reverse stitch button to secure your seam. You can see that selecting stitches on the Kenmore 150 stitch is a lot like programming a microwave oven or making a selection from a vending machine. The panel features not only stitch selection, but also variations on the particular stitch you're working on. For instance, these pads control width of zigzag stitches, and for this stitch, it is preset at 5 millimeters. But if you want to change the width, just touch the plus for a wider or the minus for a narrower width. These pads set the stitch length for both straight and zigzag stitches. Again, it is preset, but if you want to change the length, just continue to touch the plus for a longer or the minus for a shorter stitch. The buttonhole section is here. You can see it offers 3 types of buttonholes. Further down, you see the variety of special decorative stitches and monograms. Now let's go back to the top of the panel and demonstrate a simple mending stitch. The mending stitch is actually a variation on a regular zigzag because it uses the same foot as your simple zigzag stitch, foot A. Again, this is such a common stitch that Kenmore 150 stitch has a special pad for it. Here, it's number 14. Use the same starting procedure for the mending stitch as you did for the zigzag stitch. Just use the touchpad 14 instead of 13. To repair a straight tear, position the tear under the needle so that stitching will catch both sides. If the tear has a corner, use a piece of fabric under the tear to reinforce your mending. Then stitch from each end to the center. The mending stitch is especially useful for sewing patches smoothly and securely. For repairing straight tears, and for finishing seams on terracloth. It's also great for sewing bar tacks, for belt loops, and drapery pleats. This truly is a celebration for this household. These homemade touches will bring warmth and happiness. Sewing projects that used to take a month advance preparation are now done quickly and easily with the Kenmore Computer 150 stitch. In this section, we'll look at some advanced stitches you may use for more intricate sewing projects. Even these more ambitious projects become easy when you use the Kenmore 150 stitch. We'll learn the blind hem, a wide variety of decorative stitches, how to make buttonholes automatically, and finally, the over-edge seam. Making a blind hem used to take a lot of careful, tedious hand sewing to get a professional finished look. With Kenmore 150 stitch, though, you can accomplish this precision stitch much faster, more precisely than you ever dreamed possible. Begin by finishing the raw edge of your hem. You can use just about any stitch to do this, though many people prefer the over-edge stitch number 15. Using the over-edge or C foot, measure, turn up your hem and pin it. For lightweight fabrics, you may need a double fold. Here's what we want a blind hem stitch to look like. The points barely touch the fold in the material. Now let's go over the checklist of setting up the machine for the blind hem. The thread tension should be at its usual setting, around 5. Use the blind hem or the G foot here. To change to another foot, simply press the red button on the back of the foot holder. Then place the presser foot so that the pin on the foot lines up under the groove on the foot holder. Lower the presser foot holder to lock the presser foot in place. Now call up 28 on the panel for a traditional blind hem stitch, which is for woven fabrics. The stretch blind hem stitch is number 16, and you use it for stretch fabrics because it's stronger and more elastic. Fold the material on the edge to be stitched, leaving a 1/4 inch of the finished hem edge showing. Turn the sliding guide screws so that the sliding guide is very close to the left side of the blind hem foot. Place the fold of the fabric against the sliding guide so that the 1/4 inch extending edge shows on the right. The long zigzag stitch should barely pierce the folded edge of the fabric, but still sew on the 1/4 inch extended edge. After hemming, press both sides of the finished hem. The right side of the garment will show only the blind stitches. The blind hem, what used to be a tedious or professionals only task, is now easy with your Kenmore 150 stitch. One of the best parts of sewing is seeing how creative you can be. With the Kenmore 150 stitch, your clothes, your home, or gifts to others can be uniquely your creation. Here's a sampling of what the Kenmore 150 stitch can do with decorative stitches. You can sew one row or several, or vary the stitch width or the length for special effects. Or try experimenting on a scrap of fabric to see what special effects are possible. Your thread tension should be about 5. Now call up one of the decorative stitches you see listed on the panel. Let's try the Duck 63. Use the satin stitch foot as shown on the display. Mark the lines for the decoration on the fabric using a washable fabric marker. Then lower the needle at the starting point. Lower the presser foot. Lock the stitch at the beginning by pressing auto lock. Then, gently guide the fabric along that marked line. Use the auto lock to secure the row of stitches at the end. Ducks, and lots of them. Now be even more creative if you wish, because the Kenmore 150 stitch has a computer memory. You can program to do a series of decorative stitches. Here's an example. What about alternating the flowers with the leaves? Simply enter the pattern ahead of time. Touch the first pattern stitch, which is the flower. That's number 39. Then touch memory. Then touch the next stitch pattern, which is leaves, number 41. Finally, just touch memory. Then, when you press the foot control, it makes the combined pattern automatically. If you make a mistake while you're programming a pattern series, just touch clear, and it will clear the last command you entered. Then, simply enter the correct command. Clear only deletes commands one at a time, beginning with the one you just put in. This means you don't have to start from the beginning if you make a mistake. You can mix, match, or modify these decorative patterns. You can monogram without even changing the stitch foot. Have some fun, be creative. Now you can get the tailor-made look with the touch of a button on your Kenmore 150-stitch computer. Imagine buttonholes. Just the right length, flat, no puckering, both sides the same, and it takes just seconds to make. You can do it with your Kenmore 150-stitch. Your 150-stitch creates 3 different types of buttonholes to meet every sewing need. All 3 buttonholes are made in the same way. Here's how you get started. This buttonhole foot is a bit different from the other feet. Once you have raised the presser foot, you remove both the foot and the foot holder by unscrewing this screw. Put on your automatic buttonhole foot by screwing it back on. Open the button holder by pulling it back like this. Put the button you intend to use into the button holder and then press the back of the holder to lock the button in place. Draw both threads toward the left under the foot. Put the garment in place. Choose from one of 3 styles on the control panel: bar tack, rounded, or keyhole. Lower the needle to its lowest position. Lower the presser foot too. Then, just press your foot control. It's important to keep your foot pressed down until the machine stops by itself. As you can see, it uses both a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch to make each side match. Once the machine stops, you have a perfect buttonhole. To repeat the process, you move to the next buttonhole position. Touch the appropriate buttonhole style again on the control pad, and again depress the foot control. Perfect buttonhole number 2. The buttonholes are set for a standard width and stitch density. If you want to vary the settings, simply press the plus or minus on the stitch width to widen or narrow your entire buttonhole. The stitch length button controls stitch density. Press the plus or minus to adjust the stitch density of the entire buttonhole for fine or coarse stitches. Once you have completed your buttonholes, the only thing left to do is carefully cut the opening with the buttonhole opener in your accessory box. A tedious, time-consuming job, now completed perfectly with a touch of the foot control, thanks to the Kenmore 150-stitch. The overedge stitch is a type of reinforced zigzag stitch. You use it when you want a narrow seam that you don't need to press open flat. It's ideal for 1/4-inch seams on knits or on medium to heavyweight woven fabrics where you want a narrow seam. It's also a great stitch finish for seams that will be pressed open. The Kenmore 150 stitch gives you a flexibility and precision to accomplish this task. Let's begin by selecting the stitch number 15. Attach the overedge foot C. and set the thread tension at around 5. Now you're ready to stitch. Place your fabric so that the raw edges touch the black ridge. Then lower the presser foot and gently guide the fabric so that the raw edges always touch the black ridge. If you sew over several thicknesses of fabric, raise the presser foot slightly to ease the presser foot over the hump and keep the stitches from bunching up. When you have finished, remove the fabric by drawing it to the back, then out. The stitching will catch on the wire guides if you pull it toward you. A similar stitch to the over-edge stitch is the double-edged zigzag stitch. It's used for sewing fabrics which tend to fray extensively, like gabardine or linen. Program the machine for 27 when using the double-edged zigzag stitch. The over-edge seam is another hard job made easy with the Kenmore 150 stitch. Now you've caught a glimpse of a world of sewing where hours of repetitious labor are whisked away at a touch of a control, where threading is always simple and there are lots of stitches to choose from. A world where you can sew ambitious projects with confidence. The possibilities are endless. Welcome to the world of the Kenmore 150 stitch electronic sewing machine.